I didn't realize how addicted I was to being the victim until the day someone stopped feeling sorry for me. It wasn't dramatic, there was no argument, just a look, a pause, and a sentence that stayed with me longer than I expected. That was the moment everything started to shift. I used to believe I was just unlucky. Unlucky at work, unlucky in relationships, unlucky with timing. If something went wrong, I could always trace it back to someone else's decision, someone else's mistake, or circumstances that weren't in my control. At least, that's what I told myself. I worked at a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. Nothing glamorous, just deadlines, meetings, and long email threads that never really ended. I was consistent, responsible, quiet, the kind of person who followed instructions carefully and avoided conflict. But I also felt overlooked. When promotions were announced, my name wasn't there. When new projects came in, someone else led them. I told myself it was office politics, favoritism, extroverts winning again. I remember sitting at my desk one afternoon after another promotion announcement. My coworker, Daniel, got it. He'd only been there 2 years. I'd been there 5. I smiled, shook his hand, said, "You deserve it." But inside, I was building a case. He talks more than he works. He knows how to impress the boss. People like loud confidence. That evening, I drove home feeling heavy but justified. That's the word, justified. I replayed conversations in my head looking for evidence that supported my narrative. My manager interrupting me in meetings, a client complimenting Daniel instead of me. Small moments that, when stitched together, created a convincing story. I wasn't failing. I was being held back. That belief followed me everywhere. Into my friendships, into my relationship. If my girlfriend seemed distant, I assumed she was losing interest. If a friend canceled plans, I assumed I wasn't a priority. I noticed patterns everywhere, and the pattern always pointed away from me. Then something small happened that didn't fit. A few weeks after Daniel's promotion, my manager asked if I had a few minutes to talk. I expected feedback about my performance, maybe reassurance. Instead, she asked a simple question. "Do you want to lead a project?" I blinked. "Of course." She nodded slowly. "Then why don't you ever say that?" I remember feeling defensive instantly. I thought my work would speak for itself. She leaned back in her chair, not dismissive, just thoughtful. "It does. You're reliable, but you never ask for more responsibility. You don't challenge decisions. You don't pitch ideas in meetings. Sometimes it feels like you're waiting to be noticed." I felt a quiet sting, not because she was harsh, but because she wasn't. I went home unsettled. For the first time, the story in my head felt incomplete. Was I really being ignored, or was I hiding? I started replaying moments again, but differently this time. In meetings, I often had ideas. I just didn't share them if someone spoke first. When assignments were distributed, I accepted what I was given without question. When feedback was requested, I kept it safe and agreeable. I had been telling myself I was overlooked, but maybe I was invisible by design. That realization was uncomfortable. It would have been easier to blame personality differences or favoritism. Harder to admit I had chosen safety over exposure. Still, I wasn't fully convinced. Then came the second moment. My girlfriend, Maya, and I were having dinner at a small restaurant near our apartment. We'd been together 3 years. Things were stable, but something felt distant lately. I finally asked her, "Do you feel like I've changed?" She hesitated. That pause told me more than her words. "You don't let me in anymore," she said gently. "When something bothers you, you say you're fine. When you're upset, you withdraw. I feel like I'm always guessing." I felt misunderstood again. I just don't want to start a necessary conflict. She looked at me carefully. "It's not conflict, it's honesty." I drove home in silence that night. 2 different areas of my life, 2 different people, similar feedback. I avoided asking for what I wanted. I avoided expressing discomfort. I avoided risk. But somehow I still expected change. That's when the question hit me. What if I wasn't a victim of my circumstances, but a participant in them? It wasn't a dramatic revelation. It was quieter than that, almost disappointing, because it meant I had more responsibility than I wanted. The turning point came a month later. There was a new client presentation. High stakes, big account. My manager asked for volunteers to lead it. Normally, I would have stayed quiet. I remember my heart racing slightly, my mind listing reasons to stay quiet. What if I mess up? What if they say no? What if it proves I'm not ready? Then another thought appeared. What if nothing changes because I never change? Before I could overthink it, I raised my hand. I'd like to lead it. The room went quiet for half a second. Not shock, just surprise. My manager nodded. Okay, let's do it. I walked back to my desk with a strange mix of fear and relief. The weeks leading up to the presentation were intense. I worked late. I rehearsed. I asked Daniel for input instead of resenting him. And something unexpected happened. He helped. Not reluctantly, not competitively, just genuinely. That confused me at first. I had painted him as an obstacle in my mind. But in reality, he was just a coworker. The day of the presentation, I felt nervous but grounded. I spoke clearly. I answered questions directly. I didn't pretend to know everything, but I didn't shrink either. When it ended, there was no standing ovation, no dramatic applause, just a handshake from the client and a quiet, "good job" from my manager. But internally, something shifted. For the first time, I felt like I had moved towards something instead of away from it. The consequences weren't immediate promotions or life-changing success. They were subtler. In meetings, I started sharing ideas earlier instead of waiting for perfect timing. At home, I told Maya when something bothered me instead of pretending it didn't. The first few times felt awkward, vulnerable, but nothing collapsed. In fact, conversations improved. Tension decreased. I began noticing something about human behavior that I had ignored before. People respond to clarity more than assumption. When I assumed rejection, I acted guarded. When I assumed disinterest, I withdrew. When I assumed unfairness, I stopped trying. My perception shaped my behavior, and my behavior quietly shaped my results. I had been looking at my life through a lens that protected my ego but limited my growth. Being the victim felt safer. If the problem was out there, I didn't have to confront what was in here. But stepping into responsibility didn't feel like blame. It felt like power. That was the hidden truth I hadn't seen. Taking ownership doesn't mean everything's your fault. It means you recognize your influence. There are unfair situations. There are real obstacles. But I had used that truth as a blanket explanation for everything. The biggest shift wasn't external, it was internal. Internal language. Instead of thinking, they never give me a chance, I started asking, did I ask for one? Instead of thinking, she doesn't understand me, I asked, did I explain myself? Instead of thinking, nothing changes, I asked, what am I avoiding? Those questions were uncomfortable, but they were clarifying. Over time, I stopped scanning my environment for proof that I was being wronged. I started scanning myself for patterns. And here's what surprised me most. Empathy increased. When I stopped seeing myself as the constant victim, I stopped seeing others as constant aggressors. I noticed their pressures, their insecurities, their blind spots. My manager wasn't ignoring me. She was managing 10 people and responding to who stepped forward. Daniel wasn't competing with me, he was simply visible. Maya wasn't distant, she was responding to my emotional silence. The story I had built in my head had protected me from rejection, but it had also isolated me. The shift from victim to victor wasn't loud. It didn't happen overnight. It was a series of small decisions. Raise your hand, say what you need, ask the question, take the risk. And when things don't go your way, pause before assigning blame. Today, my life isn't perfect. I still catch myself slipping into old patterns.
The mind loves familiar narratives, but now I recognize the early signs. The tightening in my chest when someone else succeeds, the quick assumption that I'm being overlooked, the silent withdrawal. That's usually my cue. Instead of building a case, I build courage. I ask myself one simple question: where do I have influence here? Sometimes the answer's small, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's almost always there. Looking back, I don't feel embarrassed about the years I spent seeing myself as unlucky. I understand why I did it. It kept me safe from failure, from rejection, from exposure, but it also kept me small. The strange part is, nothing in my external world had to dramatically change for my experience to change. The office was the same, the people were the same, the city was the same. The only difference was perspective. And perspective quietly shapes reality more than we realize. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. We all have moments where we feel wronged, overlooked, or misunderstood. Sometimes that feeling is valid, but sometimes it's a shield. And the hard question isn't, why is this happening to me?
It's, what part am I playing in this? That question doesn't make you guilty. It makes you powerful. Because the moment you see your role, you also see your options. And that's where change begins. So now, whenever I feel that old narrative creeping in, I pause. I breathe. And I choose to step forward instead of stepping back. Not because I'm fearless, but because I've learned something simple. Being the victim gave me comfort, but taking responsibility gave me freedom. And if I'm honest, I'd rather have freedom.